Welcome back to Wounded on Sixes. Today we're going to be reviewing a 2,000 point competitive Death Guard list that I'm thinking about bringing to a local tournament coming up in 2 weeks. Now, as you may know, I spent a lot of my competitive life here in 10th edition playing my Tau. It's something I committed to at the beginning of the edition. And while I feel really comfortable with my Tau, I kind of feel like they're not in the greatest place in the meta right now, and aching to kind of switch it up a little bit. So what I've decided to go with here is some Death Guard. I feel like the Death Guard are really strong right now. They do have a book coming out soon, so I kind of feel like they're going to be going through a lot of changes. So I kind of really wanted to try out the current iteration of Death Guard and possibly bring them to this tournament coming up. So this list is a definite work in progress. I've made many changes to it. I've only played a couple of practice games so far. I do have a couple more games lined up this week, so I'm trying to fine tune it. So please do take the current list with a grain of salt. I will try to maybe put an update in the description later as things change in it. But I want to go over the list, why I picked these units, what their role is, and maybe some changes I'm thinking about making in the future depending on how things go. So first off, let's start with Poxwalkers. We have 2 units of 10, really just here to hold down objectives, screen out our backfield, perform actions. They do have some OC. They're at 10 man, they're not super offensive, so really we just kind of want to use them as a defensive screen and to, hold down our back objectives. Everything in our army is going to have sticky because we're bringing the Plague Company, so we can sticky an objective and then kind of use them to move block the enemy from getting on there, force the opponent to have to deal with the Poxwalkers is kind of the deal there. But other than that, they're just going to kind of be hanging out in the backfield. They're really slow, so if you want to move them anywhere, you're going to have to advance them. If you want to get offensive with Poxwalkers, I definitely recommend bringing a 20-man brick and maybe running Typhus in them. Rounding out the rest of our infantry here, we have 2 units of Death Shroud, 1 6-man, 1 3-man. These are the heavy hitters, the heavy hitter infantry of the Death Guard. They have deep strike, which is really nice, although we're not always going to keep them in strategic reserve, particularly the 6-man. There's going to be many situations where we may just want to start them on the middle of the board, put them near a ruin in the middle of the battlefield, and then kind of dare our opponent to deal with them. The 3-man, usually going to be put in strategic reserve, come down, drop into a position that our enemy doesn't want us to be in, which is really nice. We also have 2 characters. We have Typhus, and then we have a Sorcerer and Terminator armor. We will interchange these 2 depending on the matchup. For instance, if the opponent is bringing an army that has a melee unit that has a lot of attacks, but only 1 damage, then we'll most likely want to drop Typhus into the 6-man because he'll make them -1 to hit as well as -1 to wound. Whereas if they have a big melee threat that has, multiple damage attacks, we may want to put the Sorcerer with the 6-man because he can give them -1 damage with his psychic ability. Having that flexibility on these 2 units is really key. There's also those kind of situations where we really want Typhus mobile. We want him to be able to get into a position and start throwing his psychic power. So we might put him with the 3-man so it makes it easier for him to deep strike. So there's a lot of little situations like that you have to take into consideration before the game starts. So I'd like to say that these 2 do not have a unit that they like to start in. A lot of that is game time dependent. Moving right along, we have 2 units of Blight Haulers and a Plague Burst Crawler. So when this list first started, there was 2 Plague Burst Crawlers in here. I was really trying to give them a shot. They are kind of expensive. They're not super efficient, but they're big, they're tough, and they can hurl some pretty hardy indirect fire at things. They're really good against like T3 bodies, things like Astra Militarum and Eldar, which just got their books, so I thought, this will be really popular. And why it's good against those armies, it's not super great against everything else. The entropy cannon's only a strength 10. It's only 2 shots. It's only 24 inches. Like, you really got to put your Plague Burst Crawler in the mix to get that anti-tank off. But, it's just a little pricey for what it does. And, as I said, I've already dropped 1 out of the list. Right now I'm trying two Mephitic Blight Haulers. These really aren't here to make up the anti-tank that we're missing from the second crawler. They're really here to work on the strategy that I have for this list, which is, to move out my contagion as fast as possible with my Blight Haulers, and then again with my drones over here. And that way I can kind of get that aura going so that it helps with my knights over there. So that's kind of the reason why I'm bringing all these Blight Haulers, and, also in the same vein, these blow drones. So these guys aren't great, but they're also good at like trading. We don't mind throwing one of these guys out in the middle of the board, it getting shot off the board, and then whatever got, killed this is now exposed for the rest of our army to kill. So we can set up equitable trades because they're only 90 points. So we can, throw this guy out in the middle objective, score the points, have him killed, and then that kill on our Mephitic Blight Hauler leads to us killing whatever tank piece they use to kill it with one of our knights or a Death Shroud or something like that. So that's kind of the point in bringing these guys, is to, they do have they have okay anti-tank. They're +1 to wound against vehicles. The multi-melta is decent, although it's kind of close range. And the rockets are decent as well. It's fast. It does have a little bit of a melee profile as well. And like I said, it's going to help spread that contagion for us, which is really, really important for getting those buffs onto our knights. As we move along here, we have 3 units of feted blow drones. And just like with the Mephitic Blight Haulers, the real purpose of these guys is to be fast and to spread our contagion quickly. As it is right now, I have all 3 of the weapon choices on each one of these. So I have the heavy blight launcher, the Reaper, Flesh Mower, sorry, and then the twin Plague Spitters. So, kind of the reason why I have 3 of all 3 different weapon types is this is what I have in my collection, and I'm trying to run things WYSIWYG. But also I think it gives them a lot of utility, like, the one with the heavy blight launcher, I can kind of set up on like an objective and make it a fire support piece. Whereas the one with the twin Plague Spitter can help be an anti-deep strike threat because it's of its Plague Spitters. Whereas I can get super aggressive with my Flesh Mower and ride it into the enemy, both spreading my contagion and maybe taking out an infantry unit, or at the very least crippling one. So that's what I like. It gives me a lot of flexibility in terms of where I can deploy them and what they can do. And they kind of all have a very unique, ability to go after certain units, which again gives me a lot of flexibility. We don't have a lot of infantry. We're really relying on our vehicles here. So being able to have vehicles that can do very niche things in our army is going to be very important. I love flexibility. I love kind of toolboxy type list. And these bloat drones really help with that. They're also, like I said, just like with the Blight Haulers, they're really good trading pieces. They're only 90 points. We can get them out in the open. They can score us points. They can score us objectives. If they get killed, most likely they're just helping to expose the rest of our opponent's army to the rest of our army. And that's what these guys are here for. They're here to make good trades. They're here to spread contagion. They're here to score us a ton of points. And they move 10 just like the Mephitic Blight Haulers, which is really important because most of this army, everybody knows Death Guard to be slow. And the vast majority of this army, besides the foot infantry, goes at least 10 inches, which is really, really nice. Finishing up the units, well, not finishing up totally, but we have 3 Knights, Chaos Knights. We have 2 War Dog Brigands, and then we have a Carnivore. So, forgive, the Carnivore is not exactly finished yet. But the 2 War Dog Brigands, these are going to be our main anti-tank piece, but they're also really good at anti-infantry because they have their missile hats and the Avenger Chain Cannon. But that Demon Breath Spear, that can wreck enemy vehicles. That's why we're going to bring 2 of them. We're going to kind of try to keep these guys behind. We're going to wait for our other faster, cheaper vehicles to help expose our enemy's units to us, and then we're going to use the Brigands to take them down. The Knights are really good at holding objectives with 8 OC. They move 12. And what's really important about this list and why we are bringing so many fast vehicles is we are trying to spread the contagion out against our opponent so that our Knights are benefiting from it. So not only getting the Not only will the units that they're shooting at be less tough, but we'll also get, which will normally bring the -1 to save contagion. So they'll also be getting a pretty much a plus, an extra AP. The brigands also have an ability that they get +1 AP if they're targeting the closest enemy model. So, I mean, we can really rack up the AP here and really start giving our opponents troubles with their saves. I mean, we can make it so that on occasion, depending on the unit we're shooting at, if they don't have an invul, they're just not going to get a save, which is really nice. The Carnivore, this is a fairly new unit to the list, and I really like it. A lot of people will say to start them in strategic reserve and then bring them in a rapid ingress. Very, very good strategy. But I also kind of like to start it on the board. It moves 14 and it can re-roll its charge rolls. So, you know, if you put it in an advantageous position, it can usually start clapping things early turn 1, if not definitely by turn 2. But again, there's also the rapid ingress strategy with it as well. It's got a great little profile. It has an anti-infantry, an anti-elite infantry, and an anti-tank weapon. Again, you can only pick one. They're all melee. It does have a missile hat, though, which is pretty decent. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoy the Knights. I think they give the Death Guard army a lot of punch, very quick, good OC. Yeah, and they're just really fun units to play with. And you know, I'm getting to the point where I may have to start a Chaos Knight army if I keep buying these brigands. They're just really, really fantastic units. And it works really well with the strategy of spreading that contagion and making them gain those buffs from it is really, really important. Then we're going to round out the list here with the man, the myth, the legend, Mortarion. Mortarion's just kind of a beast. He's a lot of wounds. He's hard to kill. He's not impossible to kill. He's got a decent sweep. 14 attacks, 15 attacks is not bad, but not a lot of AP on it. But we can get it up to AP2 with the -1 to save as well. His strike definitely leaves something to be desired. It's only 5 attacks. But what he's really good at is helping to buff the rest of the army. We will normally run the reroll wound rolls of 1, basically the old poison or the old plague weapon ability. He can have a 6-inch aura, and he can also have a 6-inch aura of ignoring modifiers. So any units that have stealth, any units that make it -1 to wound, anything like that, any kind of modifiers except to the save roll, he basically ignores, which is really nice. He's tough. He is hard to hide, but he also now has deep strike. I have yet to use the deep strike ability on him in any game, but who knows? I could see, like, in a scenario where I'm playing something like Tau or Votan or a big shooty army, I may want to start him in deep strike just so that he's not an easy target for those big guns. But other than that, I mean, Mortarion's a pretty decent unit. Again, he's not a killer. He's more of like a big giant support piece. He's hard to shift. He moves really fast. He's got that feel no pain. He's got the 4-up. His shooting weapons are pretty decent as well. So, you know, you can get a lot of utility out of Mortarion, and if you use him correctly, he can really wreck certain armies. He's just sometimes a stat check on certain armies that you'll see out there. So, yeah, that's really what we're trying to do here. We're usually always going to go with the -1 save. It really does depend. I did play Eldari with this army, and I actually went with the -1 weapon skill, -1 ballistic skill, mostly because they always get an invul, so why not minus their ballistic skill and weapon skill? So that actually worked out pretty well because I didn't really need the extra AP, but most times you're going to take that -1 to save here. And this list is really good at no matter what extra contagion you pick, it will help to spread it around. So this is the list. Again, I have a lot more testing games to go. There's definitely some things that I'm looking to maybe swap out. I've really thought about bringing in Plague Marines. They're just so expensive. I've thought about maybe bringing in a Predator, but I just don't really have a Death Guard Predator, so I'd be like scrambling to get a new model. So there's part of this is hobby lag, part of it is collection driven, but for the most part, I really like the way this list clicks, and I think that with a little bit more tuning, it might be the list that I'm bringing to my tournament next month. So why don't you let me know what you think about it? Go ahead and like the video if you enjoyed it, and if you haven't, please subscribe. We're always looking for more subscribers. We want the channel to grow, and I just want to thank everybody for tuning in for another episode of Wounded on Sixes.